I was 14 the first time I babysat for money instead of just watching my cousins for free. And looking back, that's about the age most of us start doing this job with zero idea what we're actually walking into. These are 3 stories from people who found that out the hard way. Get comfortable. When I was 13, I babysat for a family 2 streets over. A single dad, recently divorced, 1 daughter, 6 years old, quiet in the specific way kids get when something at home has been hard for a while. He worked evening shifts at a hospital, so this was a regular Tuesday and Thursday thing, not a one-off. Easy money, I thought. She was 6. How much trouble could a 6-year-old be? The first few weeks were completely uneventful. She liked coloring, she liked a very specific cartoon about talking dogs. She went to bed around 8 without a fight. The only thing I noticed early on and dismissed immediately was that she had a habit of talking to her bedroom wall before falling asleep. Not out loud in a performative kid way, but low, private, like she was having an actual back and forth with someone. I assumed it was an imaginary friend. Every kid has one. I didn't think about it again. About a month in, I started noticing the conversations had a rhythm to them. Not random babbling, but pauses in the right places, like she was actually listening to something between her own lines. I asked her once, casually, who she talked to at night, and she said, without looking up from her coloring book, Marcus. I asked if Marcus was a friend from school. She said no. Marcus lived in the wall, and he only came when it was dark. And he knew when I was in the house, because he could hear my voice through the vent. I remember laughing it off in the moment and telling her that was a fun story. And going back to making dinner, because 6-year-olds say strange things constantly, and you can't treat every one of them like a crisis. The next time I sat, I actually paid attention to the wall she talked to. It was the wall her closet backed onto, which also happened to be an exterior wall of the house, facing the side yard where the trash cans were. I told myself that was a completely unremarkable detail and went back downstairs once she'd fallen asleep, the way I always did. The 3rd week, I heard something that stopped me halfway down the stairs. A voice, low, definitely not the girl's, coming faintly from somewhere near her room. I froze on the staircase for what felt like a full minute, telling myself it was the television downstairs, carrying up through the vents. Some sitcom laugh track distorted by the ductwork. A completely reasonable explanation. I went back up and cracked her door. She was asleep. The room was silent. I told myself I'd imagined it, because the alternative was something I didn't want to sit with at 13 years old alone in someone else's house. The night everything changed, I got there a little early and the dad was still home finishing up before his shift. I mentioned it to him, half joking, that his daughter had quite the imagination with her invisible friend Marcus, who lived in the wall. He didn't laugh. He went very still and asked me to describe exactly what she'd said, word for word, which I did as best I could. He didn't explain anything, just told me to keep her closet door shut that night no matter what, and left for work looking rattled in a way that made my stomach turn, even though I still didn't understand why. Around 11, I heard the voice again, clearer this time, coming from the closet, and it was saying her name, soft and patient, the exact sing-song a parent uses to coax a kid awake gently. I stood outside her door with my phone in my hand, too scared to go in, too scared to call anyone yet, because I had literally nothing to say that didn't sound insane. Then I heard her get out of bed, and I heard the closet door creak open from the inside of the room, and I finally made myself go in. She was sitting cross-legged in front of her open closet, facing the back wall, having a full conversation with nobody I could see, nodding along like she was being told something. When I turned on the light, she blinked up at me, completely calm, and said Marcus had to go because I turned the light on too fast, and now he was scared of me. I got her out of that room and called her dad at the hospital immediately, and he came home within 20 minutes, which told me everything about how seriously he actually took it, even if he hadn't said so out loud. What we found the next morning, once he finally called the police, was a small section of the exterior siding near her closet wall that had been quietly pried loose and reattached over and over, judging by the marks, enough times to create a narrow gap a person could speak through if they crouched by the trash cans after dark. There was a folding stool tucked behind the cans that didn't belong to anyone in the house. It turned out a man who used to do occasional yard work for the previous owners had kept a key to the side gate and had been coming back at night for months, learning the girl's routine, learning her name, learning exactly when the babysitter usually went downstairs. He was caught 2 weeks later, a few streets away, trying the same thing on a different house. I don't know what would have happened if her dad hadn't come home when he did that night, and I try very hard not to think about it. I do know I still can't hear a kid mention an imaginary friend without my whole body going cold. I was 15, and this was my most reliable job. A Thursday night standing gig for a family with a 7-year-old boy named Caleb, sweet kid, a little intense about routines, the kind of kid who needed his socks folded a specific way, or the whole night fell apart. His parents did a weekly date night, always back by 11, always paid on time. I like that family. I want to say that up front because it makes what happened harder to explain, not easier. The first strange thing was small enough that I forgot about it until much later. Caleb had this habit every few weeks of repeating a phrase that wasn't his in a voice that wasn't quite his either, a little flatter, a little older sounding. Things like check the back door or she's on the porch again, said completely out of context, mid-conversation about something else entirely, and then he'd go right back to what he'd been doing like nothing happened. I asked him about it once and he shrugged and said sometimes he just heard things and said them out loud, which is honestly the kind of answer that sounds normal enough coming from a 7-year-old that you let it go. A few weeks later, I was putting him to bed, and he told me, completely matter of fact, that the baby monitor in his room talked to him sometimes, not his parents' voices, a different voice, and it told him things to remember for later. I asked what kinds of things, and he listed off, half asleep, a handful of details that had nothing to do with anything a 7-year-old should be thinking about. What time I usually got there, what time his parents usually left, whether I locked the front door after they left or not. I told myself, lying in bed that night at home, that he must have overheard actual conversations somewhere and was just repeating fragments back the way kids do, echoing adult logistics without understanding them. It was easier to believe that. The night it's stopped being easy to believe, I was downstairs around 9, and the baby monitor on the kitchen counter, the parent unit, crackled to life even though Caleb's room was silent on the screen. Just static at first. And then, faintly underneath it, a voice, definitely not a television, definitely not coming from anywhere in that house, saying something too quiet to make out. I picked it up and it cut out immediately. I told myself it had to be interference from a neighbor's monitor, that this happens with older baby monitor models all the time, that it was a completely mundane technical hiccup and nothing more. 2 nights later, working that same job, I heard Caleb repeat a phrase that made my stomach drop in a way none of the others had. He said, in that same flat, borrowed voice, "Tell her to check the mailbox." There was nothing in the mailbox that morning when his parents left. When I checked it that night, out of some instinct I still can't fully explain, folded piece of paper inside, with my own name written on it in block letters. Nothing else, no message, just my name, like whoever put it there wanted me to know they knew exactly who I was. I called Caleb's parents immediately and they came home within 10 minutes. And to their credit, they didn't dismiss any of it, not for a second. It turned out the baby monitor they used operated on an old analog frequency, the same kind used by a specific brand of walkie-talkie, and someone with a matching device close enough to the house could pick up the signal and, more disturbingly, transmit on it too if they knew the right channel. Caleb hadn't been hearing a monitor malfunction. He'd been hearing a real person close enough to the property to broadcast directly into his room. The police traced the frequency to a range of about 200 feet, which meant whoever it was had been sitting somewhere within sight of that house, multiple nights a week, close enough to watch us come and go. They never caught him. Caleb's family moved the following spring, officially for his dad's job, though I've always wondered. I think about that name on the folded paper more than almost anything else from those years, and I still don't use baby monitors with my own kids, not the old kind, not any kind I don't fully understand. I want to start this one by saying I like this family more than any other job I ever had, which is exactly what makes it sit so wrong in my chest, even now. I was 16. They were a well-off couple 2 towns over, a boy and a girl, 7 and 9, and they paid better than anyone else I worked for, always in cash. Always with a little extra folded in for gas money, even though I lived close enough to walk. The first odd thing, which I didn't think twice about at the time, was that before my very first night, they had me fill out a short form. Nothing unusual on paper. My full name, my parents' names, our home address, my school, a couple of emergency contacts, standard sitter and take stuff, they said, for insurance purposes, in case anything ever happened while I was in their care. I filled it out at their kitchen table without a second thought, because plenty of families I'd worked for did some version of this, and it made them seem responsible, careful, the kind of parents who thought things through. The kids were great, genuinely easy and funny, and never any real trouble. The parents liked to chat with me for a few minutes before they left each time. Easy, friendly small talk that always somehow circled around to my other jobs. Did I sit for anyone else nearby? What were their schedules usually like? Did any of those families travel much? Did I know if they had security systems? I answered all of it happily, because it felt like normal adult interest in a teenager's little part-time hustle, and honestly, it felt nice to be asked. The thing that first snagged in my mind, though I didn't act on it for months, happened on a night I was looking for tape in their home office drawer to fix a torn page in one of the kids' books. Tucked under a stack of folders was a small notebook filled with names, my name among them, along with the names of what I slowly realized were other families in the neighborhood, each with a few lines of notes next to them. Work schedules. Alarm codes I definitely hadn't given them, not for their own house, for other houses. I told myself it was some kind of neighborhood watch list, a community safety thing, because that explanation let me close the drawer and go back to fixing the book. A few weeks later, one of those names in the notebook, a family a few streets from mine, had their house broken into while they were away for a wedding. Nothing violent, just methodical. Jewelry and electronics gone. No forced entry. Like whoever did it had walked in with a key. I remember hearing about it from my mom and feeling a strange, unplaceable chill, but I still didn't connect it to that notebook, because connecting it meant admitting something about people I liked, people who'd always been kind to me, and that felt impossible. It kept happening. Not constantly, maybe once every couple of months. Always a family from somewhere in that little web of names I'd half noticed and fully ignored, always while they were traveling, always clean. I only found out how deep it went when a detective came to my house on a Sunday afternoon and laid out, gently, patiently, exactly what that intake form and those friendly little conversations had actually been for. They'd used sitters like me across 3 different neighborhoods. Kids too young to think of themselves as a security risk, to build a running map of who was home, who wasn't, who had alarms, who didn't, who trusted a friendly couple enough to have them over for coffee and never think twice about what got said across the table. They were arrested that fall. The kids, the 2 I genuinely loved spending time with, went to live with a grandparent out of state, and I never found out what happened to them after that.